Okay, so we're continuing over here tonight in the Haggadah, and we spent last night speaking about the concept of halach ma'anya, that there's this duality that's going to take place throughout the entire Haggadah. And that is that on one hand, we speak about the celebration, or we speak about the slavery and the servitude, so we know where we came from. On the other hand, we always are keeping in mind, obviously, the tremendous redemption that the Jewish people end up going through, which is really our journey that we're taking through the Haggadah. And that's why the matzah on one hand is the bread of our affliction. It's the lechem oini of our poverty, of our pain, of our suffering. At the same time, as we know, the matzah really is a symbol of our freedom. And then we come to the next part, which is the famous questions which begin the entire evening. And that is the manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halayla, is what is different about this night from all the other nights of the year. And we have to imagine, or we have to think about it in the following way, that this is the kind of a question that a child, which is one of the reasons that we do so many different things by the table on the Seder night, is that we're trying to get the children to stay awake. We're trying to pique their curiosity. We're trying to get their interest in the storyline and the messages that are going to be given over on the night of the Seder. And therefore, as we start doing things differently, the child chimes in from the beginning and he asks right away, why is this night so different than all of the other nights of the year? And we have to remind ourselves that the reason that children ask so many questions is because they see things going on around them. They see adults and grown-ups acting in a certain way. They see them doing actions, and the child doesn't understand why the adult is doing the things that they do. As you watch a child grow up, they start asking as they can begin to articulate their words and ask. The sign of a chacham, of a wise child, is a child that is constantly asking question after question after question, because they know that they see things. They understand that something is happening in front of them. Someone is doing something that they themselves don't do or don't know about or are not aware of. And they would like to know why, which is the most famous word that a child asks. Why? Why do you do that? Why did you do that? Why does that look like that? Why is this going on like that? A child is asking because they would like to reach a much greater level of understanding so that they can incorporate your actions and your way of life into their life as well. So we are, each and every one of us on the night of the Seder, we are supposed to look at ourselves as children. And we're supposed to have curiosity and interest, and our intelligence is supposed to be thriving inside of us. And we really, truly want to understand, why do the Jewish people do the things that they do on the night of the Seder? And the answer to that question, or the answers to the questions that we're going to ask in the beginning, are going to be the most profound details and understandings and foundations of our faith. They are going to open our eyes to a recognition of what it truly means to be part of Klal Yisrael, and what it means individually, what it means to be a Jew. And therefore, if you can't get yourself in the mood of having that young, spry curiosity, so the Haggadah itself is helping us out. And that's why, as we mentioned last night, whether you are at the Seder table this year, surrounded by your children and your grandchildren, or whether you're at the Seder table just together with your spouse, or whether you're at the Seder table all by yourself this year, everyone is obligated to ask these 4 questions, because we need to bring out the inner child, as they would say it in the world of psychology. We need to bring the inner child out from within inside of ourselves to be able to engage ourselves in the study and the glory is night that is upon us of the Seder. So manishtana alayla hazeh mikol halaylos, why is this night so different than all the other nights? Now there's 4 questions, and the questions are really divided up into 2 parts. You have the 1 and 2, and then you have 3 and 4. And 1 and 2 are a reflection that this child is having because he'd like to know that if it's Yom Tiv, and it's a night that normally everybody is in a happy mood and celebrating and eating good and so on and so forth, so why are we stuck eating matzah on the night of a Yom Tov, on the night of this holiday? Matzah itself is, as we pointed out yesterday, it's not a very classy food. It's rather on the low end in the food spectrum. It's on a pretty low end of the totem pole over there. It was the food that the Jewish people ate when they were slaves in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. So the boy is asking, the young girl is asking, why do we eat matzah on this night? Why such lowliness? And then he asks further, on all other nights, we have salads, we have carrots, we have tomatoes, we have lettuce, we have all different things. However, on this night, we're eating maror, we're eating the bitter herbs. If it's Yom Tov and you're supposed to be happy, and you're supposed to enjoy yourself, and you're supposed to be in the best of moods, and the table is set with all this beautiful finery, crystal and china and silverware, everything that you could imagine for a beautiful Yom Tov meal, why are we sitting there with these bitter herbs that could make a person cry, that could make a person have smoke come out of their nose, that makes a person have a foul taste in the bitter taste in the mouth? Why are we eating that? And so therefore the first 2 questions are really revolving around the slavery and the servitude of the Jewish people. The second 2 questions are that normally we don't usually even dip our vegetables even one time. Now he's asking, but now I see, even though that there's slavery that we're invoking over here, but people that are well-to-do, people that are sitting high and pretty, those are the people who normally dip their vegetables and dip their food, and they do it relaxing, and they do it in such a noble type of a way. So are we noblemen? And of course, the last question, which is, normally we can sit or we can lean, however it is that you're going to eat on a regular night. On this night, we're all reclining, which means, as we know, that's derech cherus, like the Gemara says. That is the way that free people, that noblemen, that's the way that they eat. You have to remember, in the olden days, which is not the way that we sit around a table right now, but they used to have like these couch chairs, and everybody would lean. You'll imagine to yourself the pictures of Cleopatra having the grapes dangling down and being fed to her. That's really the way that the noblemen and the richest of the rich and the most elite of society, that's the way that they would eat. And therefore we're all free. We are all noblemen on the night of the Seder, and therefore we lean. So this child is asking, so what is this night all about? It's a night where we talk about slavery, or it's a night where we speak about our freedom? Is it a night where it's bitter and it's simple tasting matzah that doesn't taste like my mommy's challah taste all year long? Or is it a night where we are royal and we are regal and we are supposed to celebrate as the freest of nations around? Those are his questions. And those are the exact questions that we want to ask at the beginning of the Haggadah. Because as we pointed out yesterday, that is the story of the Haggadah. The story of the Jewish people is, from the ashes comes the victory. From the tragedy comes the blessing. From the slavery comes the freedom. And that is what we are working towards throughout the entirety of the Haggadah, trying to be able to get to this point where we are so infused with an understanding of our past and an appreciation of our present and a hopefulness for our future. And therefore, these questions at the very beginning, they bring us into that realm. So now the Haggadah is going to begin to answer the questions of the 4 questions. And here is the answer. Now, if someone asks you a question, so you're supposed to answer the question that they asked you. So why do we eat matzah tonight? Why are we eating bitter herbs tonight? So explain to them the reason we eat matzah is because X, Y, and Z. The reason we eat bitter herbs is because X, Y, and Z. Why are we dipping twice like free men? Why are we leaning to the side like we're nobility? So answer, the reason we dip is because of this, and the reason we lean is because we in fact are free. But there is no immediate answer over here in the Haggadah. The Haggadah is basically telling over to the child that is there, inquisitive, with all of his fascinating questions as he recognizes the duplicity of the evening. We are telling him, sit back and enjoy the story of the Jewish people and the journey that we are about to embark upon right now, which is going to take us from beginning till end of the Haggadah, and then you'll really understand what the answer is. So the Haggadah starts off with Avadim Ayinu Lefar b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves until Paro in Mitzrayim, which really is the beginning of the answer. Why do we eat matzah? Why do we have bitter herbs? Because we were slaves. We weren't always free to do what we want. We didn't always have a shul down the street from us. We didn't always have holy books in our home. We weren't always able to make a bris milah in our house or in a hall. We weren't always able to do that. Once upon a time we were slaves and there was no bris milah during that time. Once upon a time we were slaves and there was no challah like your mommy makes on Shabbos. Once upon a time we were slaves. There was no Yom Tov of Pesach for a person to enjoy and to revel in the glory of our past. There wasn't such a thing. And therefore we were avodim ayinu l'par Mitzrayim. We were slaves unto Paro in Mitzrayim, to Paro, that king, in Mitzrayim. Now the commentators ask, once that I know that we were slaves to Paro, to the Pharaoh, so then obviously we were in Egypt, because any history buff knows where were the Paros of this world located? They're all located in Egypt. So it could have just said, Avadim ayinu l'Paro, we were slaves into Paro. Why does the verse have to add, or the line sentence over here have to add, b'Mitzrayim, in Egypt? And they answer the following, that we have to know not only were we under the rule of a very wicked king and a harsh king who was Paro, but the entire nation of Mitzrayim, the entire Egyptian nation, all the people, all of the ministers and the governors and the soldiers and the warriors, and even the maidservants, the Egyptian maidservants, even them, they hated us with all of their heart and all of their soul, and they did everything within their powers and ability to make our life of slavery miserable as well. And therefore we were slaves unto Paro and Mitzrayim. However, Hashem took us out of there with the strong hand, and an outstretched arm. Why do we need to know that it was a yad chazaka, a strong hand, and that it was also outstretched? If we know that it's strong, that's enough for me to know that Hashem has all the power, all the might that He needs in order to go and to save us. What does it mean, zroya netuya, that it was outstretched? So we can explain it with the following mashal, the following parable. Imagine a person is walking past a lake or a river, and he suddenly hears screaming. Someone is screaming, help me, I'm drowning, I'm drowning. And he walks over and he sees that there's someone that is there, and they're literally drowning in the water. And this man happens to be a powerhouse, a mighty fellow. And he says, don't worry, I'm very strong, I'm very strong. And they say, yeah, I know that you're strong, but please help me, save me. And imagine that he reaches out to try to grab the person, but his arm simply can't reach. No matter how strong he is, no matter how mighty he is, it doesn't really matter at this point, because if you can't reach the person who is drowning, then you'll never be able to save them. HaKadosh Baruch is telling us, not only am I the omniscient, the most mighty of all kings of the universe, not only am I the most powerful God that anyone will ever know of and anyone will ever see, but I have a zroya netuya, which means my arm is outstretched. It can reach anywhere that it needs to go in this world to rescue and to lift up and to bring the Jewish people to salvation. And therefore, that is part of our celebration on the night of the Seder, we are ecstatic that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the mightiest of all might, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is limitless in what He's able to do to come to our rescue and to save us. And again, as we mentioned a couple of nights ago, we have to keep in mind that the miracles which took place during the Exodus from Egypt, and the fact that Hashem was able to remove us from such a wicked king and such a harsh nation, and He did it in such a miraculous way, it's to be mechazik, to strengthen us, to remind ourselves that whatever exile we will find ourselves in, whatever difficult straits we will be stuck and trapped in, we have nothing to worry, because Hashem is Yad HaChazaka. He has the strong hand, Uzraya Netuya, and the outstretched arm. He will be able with all of His might to save us wherever we are in any single generation. And now the Haggadah makes a wondrous statement. If Hashem would not have removed us from Mitzrayim, we and our children and our grandchildren, we would still be slaves to Paro in Mitzrayim. Now the wonder of this statement is that throughout all of history, there have been many periods and many countries which had slavery. This is not a concept that is only unique to the Jewish people. We have in many countries across the world, throughout the decades and generations, there were times where there was slavery. And yet we know that in all of those countries, slavery always ended up getting abolished, and the slaves ended up going free. So how is it possible that Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, who are the Am HaNivcher, we're the chosen nation, we're the Am Segula, we're the treasured nation, Hashem loves us and He desires us and He wants us to succeed and to have blessing in our lives. How is it possible to believe that Hashem Himself, who created to a great extent our slavery, how is it possible to believe that He never would have redeemed us from that we never would have been redeemed in one way or another? And the Haggadah is saying over here that if it wouldn't be for the fact that Hashem Himself came in and removed us, we would still be slaves in Egypt today. The Egyptians never would have let us go. There would have been some emancipation proclamation where the civil rights activists would have come, or the world powers would have got together, and they would have said, it's not nice what the Egyptians are doing to the Jews. We're going to put world power and pressure on them and say, you must release the Jewish people. Slavery is passé. We don't do those kind of things anymore. Never would have happened. Says the Haggadah, we'd still be there today. How's that possible? So the Mefarshim, the commentators, answer in the following way. Chazal tell us, the sages teach us, that when the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, when we were in Egypt, not only did we sink into the oblivion of slavery, but there were two types of slavery that were going on. There was, of course, the physical slavery. If you would have looked on CNN, if they would have covered such news about the Jewish people, you would have seen them backbreaking labor. You would have seen them being whipped by the taskmasters. They would have been building the pyramids, schlepping these gigantic stones here and there. You would have seen a nation that was enslaved physically, with miserable life, horrible life in front of us, and the Egyptians gloating and laughing as we are standing behind the barbed wire fence and the world does not come to our defense. That would have been one picture that you would have seen. However, Rav Dessler and others point out that the real slavery which was taking place in Egypt was far beyond the turmoil of the physical bondage. It was actually the spiritual enslavement and trappings that the Egyptians did to the Jewish people. Mitzrayim, the word Mitzrayim, which means Egypt, is from the language of Meitzar, which means a narrow, constricting strait, which means that the land of Egypt was something that was constricting and confining upon the Jewish people, and we were not able to release the chains that were there. not on our bodies, but they were so expert in destroying our neshamas and destroying our souls that our souls were literally captive in the land of Mitzrayim. It was enclosed and confined. There was no escape. Chazal teach us that when the Jewish people were there, as we went inside the land of Israel, unfortunately, we assimilated, we became one like the Egyptians. We stopped doing the mitzvahs, we stopped believing in Hashem, we even stopped doing the mitzvah of Bris Milah, we stopped everything. We were not interested in our Kodesh Baruch Hu, Aki Huzeh, one drop. And we sunk into the quicksand of Egypt to the 49th level of impurity, of spiritual impurity. Say Chazal, had we been there for one more moment, just 1 second more in the land of Egypt, we would have sunk into the spiritual quicksand of impurity, and we never would have been able to pull ourselves out. Tshuva, the ability to return, the ability to restore ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ability to come close once again, it's to a certain extent, the sages are teaching us, as long as you don't go off the deep end and end up drowning in 50 levels of impurity, which is the lowest that a person could reach, then there's always hope of the geula, of the redemption, and there's always hope that you can come back to your original state. And that is where we were holding at this moment in history. We're holding at level 49, and we're dropping closer and closer to 50. Says the Haggadah, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself would not have removed us from Egypt at that moment, that exact moment, right before we slipped into the oblivion, then we and our children and our grandchildren and so on and so forth for thousands of years, we would all still be drowning in the spiritual impurities of Egypt. There would be no return home at all. And therefore we celebrate. In the opening lines over here of the Haggadah, we praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You had mercy on us, Hashem. What, in fact, did we do to merit that we're going to be, that the downward slope is going to stop? As we mentioned last week, I believe, that at one moment in time, the king of Egypt died, and there was no work on that day, and the Jewish people didn't have to wake up early and go to the fields and build the pyramids, get beat to death almost. So what did they do on their day off? The moment that Paro died and they saw there's no work, it says that the Yitzhak El Hashem, they cried out to Hashem, which means that deep, deep down inside of their neshama, inside of who they really were, they were not living on the 49th level of impurity. Deep, deep down, they really were a nation like no other that was still clinging to the spiritual purity that resonates inside of the neshamas, inside the souls of each and every one of us. And because of that, Hashem said, I'll take you out. And therefore, he rescued us and he saved us from slipping in to the wasteland of impurity, of tumah, and therefore we are no longer slaves in Egypt. But had he not done that, so then we would still be there today. There would be no escape, no way of getting around it. And now he says the following, even if we're all wise men, we're all people of understanding. We're all elders, we've been around, we've seen it all. We have the wisdom and the experience of a person who lives 70, 80, 90, 100 years. Even if we were all great Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, who had all of the Torah on our fingertips, mitzvah aleinu lesaper b'yitzias Mitzrayim, still there exists a mitzvah upon each and every one of us to be engaged in the telling over of the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And anybody who increases and continues talking more and more and more about the details, the signs and the wonders as we spoke about, as we pointed out, that person himself, it becomes meshubach, he becomes elevated, he becomes greater and better, because his awareness and his clarity and his understanding of Hashem and the miracles that He does for the Jewish people becomes so bright and so magnificent and revealing in His eyes that he's a different person. As we said yesterday, we must aim to walk away from the Seder, the first night and the second night, a different person than we were when we walked in. A person that is meshubach, that is elevated. A person that is praiseworthy. A person who has a greater clarity on who he is as a Jew deep inside and his relationship with Hashem, our emunah, our faith, our bitachon, our trust in Hashem, the miracles that we believe in, that we see. All of that is what we're supposed to grow from on the night. So the Haggadah says that a person should know, no matter how much you think that you know, you can never talk about this enough. And that, as we saw in the Sefer Chinuch the other night, is because when the Pesach, when the mouth talks, it is ma'orer the lev, it awakens and it arouses and it intrigues your heart. And if your heart is open wide to all these messages, the heart is known as the Ramchal writes, it's the Melech al kol ha'avarim. It is the king over all of your limbs. It is the central energy that exists within inside of your physical body, but more importantly, it is the central energy which exists inside your spiritual essence as well. And therefore, if the heart is drawn into the world of the Exodus, into the world of the Haggadah, into the world of Hashem, so then you will pull the rest of yourself in there as well, and it will be a tremendously elevating experience. And that's why it doesn't matter if you're a chacham, if you're wise. It doesn't matter if you're a person of great understanding. If you're a zaken, the reason that HaKadosh Baruch, I heard once from one of my rebbeim, the reason that Hashem made it that a person ages in this world, so that as they get older, their hair will turn gray, is because you need to know who to go and ask questions to. The older the person, hopefully, the wiser they have become. They've learned from their mistakes. They have gone through so many experiences in life. They have studied. They have imbibed the teachings of Torah, and therefore their mind has a clarity that the youth of our generation certainly does not have. The youth of our generation who are being raised on screen time and being raised on Netflix and being raised on so many other distractions of life, they certainly don't have wisdom. But the older generation who lived a much simpler, purer existence, who didn't grow up with all of this narishkeit that is in the world today, those are the people that you go and you ask questions to, because their innate wisdom of age, which has transcended all the different generations, they're the ones that you could get a good answer from. So even if you're the Zakanim, you're the elders of the generation, it's not enough. You still need to be engaged constantly in the telling over of the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And even if you're Yoigim Esat Torah, you know all the Torah, you know everything already. You know every midrash, you know every word in the Gemara, you know every pasuk, that every verse that there is in the Chumash, you know it all. So you might think, so why should I waste my time the night of the Seder and tell over everything I know already? Let me just keep learning more things. No. Everybody has to be a Pesach. Everybody has to talk. Everybody has to get into it. And it could be the more that you know, the more wisdom that you have already, the deeper you can go into it, and the more you'll appreciate, and the more you'll be able to unearth and uncover the mysteries and the secrets and the depth of the teachings that we're going to have inside of the Haggadah. So the Gemara brings down the very famous story. And the famous story is that Ma'aseh Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azar, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, all these great sages, they were reclining throughout the night in Bnei Brak, and they were going through the entire Haggadah cover to cover. And then after they finished the Haggadah, they could not stop the whole night. These five great sages, they just kept talking and learning, as we say, each one trading back and forth, different ideas, different insights, and profound messages that are there in the night of the Seder. Until Shabbat Talmidei V'Amru Lahem, they went the whole night until the students came and they said, Rabbi Seinu, Higiyazman Krishma Shel Shachris. You were up the whole night. Now it's time to daven to pray Shachris. So the Vilna Gaon says that the reason that this story is placed into the Haggadah is to prove the point. To prove the point that we just said. And that point is, it doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter how smart that you think you are. Even the smartest of all people, Rabbi Akiva, who could be greater than Rabbi Akiva in his generation, even the smartest of all the people, the greatest sage of that time, even he stayed up the whole night. And he delved deeper and deeper and deeper, and he got into it, so he would understand what it means the night of the Seder, what it means Pesach, what it means all the different details of Haggadah. He went through all the midrashim that he could possibly find on the splitting of the sea, and so on and so forth. So from these great sages, we see how imperative, how important it is that a person is going to utilize their time on the night of the Seder, and they're going to learn and learn and learn, because you only have what to gain. Like that child who asks in the beginning of the Seder, Manishtana alayla, what is so unusual? Why is this night so different than all the other nights? Just like a child wants to know what it means to be big. Just like a child sees his father, his mother, his older siblings do things, and they ask why, or they hear you say something, and you talk to them and they say why, and they look at you with those big, curious eyes. Why? It's because they want to get bigger. They want to become greater. The Rosh writes in the Orches Chaim, he says that a person should always hang out with people that are greater than them. Why? Because your eyes should always be focused upwards to see the people that are doing better than you, are striving more than you, are being more successful than you, are better off than you. Not talking about in the physical world. I'm talking about in the spiritual realms that we are going into over here. They're happier, they're more at peace, they have greater things going on in their life. I'm always looking up. If I'm looking up, so then I will aim for the stars. I'll try to become greater myself. But if I always hang out with people that are lower than me, I always hang out with people that are doing less than me, then I'll always think to myself, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm not as low as that person over there. I didn't do as little things as they did. So for myself, I'm doing great. You'll never be motivated for greatness. A child is, the beauty of a child is, I believe it's the Panovich Rav who says it, the beauty of the child is they're always looking at people that are older than them. They're always looking towards people that can do more than them. They're always trying to figure out how to be bigger, how to be greater, how to be strong, how to be more accomplished. And so too on the night of the Haggadah, the night of Pesach, when we're sitting around the table and we're asking such deep, philosophical, wonderful questions, the reason we're asking is because we also want to become greater on the night of the Seder. We want to become greater in our dedication to Hashem and to His mitzvah. We want to become greater in our understanding of the world of Amunah, of faith. We want to become greater in having a historical perspective of how Hashem runs the world, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, how every little detail in the Haggadah works itself out until we get to the finally, we'll get to the end, and we'll see everything from beginning to end. It all fits into place. I want to become greater on the night of the Haggadah, the night of the Seder, the night of Pesach. If that's my kavanah, if that's my intent, so then as I'm going through the entire evening, again, whether I'm surrounded by children or I'm not, whether I'm with a spouse or I'm not, whether I'm just by myself, quarantined, all by myself, unfortunately it might happen this year, but a person can end up engaging so much in the story of the Jewish people, it will be the most enlightening evening of your life. And it certainly will be probably much more enlightening than a lot of the other things that are going on right now in our quarantines. But we got to use that night for the greatest thing we possibly can. So we'll leave off over here. We're gonna get tomorrow, God willing, to the four sons, which itself is a great lesson in what it means to be inquisitive and to ask. It's a great lesson in chinuch, in raising children, and it's really a great lesson in raising ourselves as well. So for tonight, we will leave it over here, and Be'ez Hashem, with Hashem's help, we shall continue in our journey through the Haggadah tomorrow night. Have a wonderful evening.